Okay, welcome to Faces of Stone, where we talk about anything and everything, but very specifically for the time being and until the release of The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars. My name is Marc-Anthony Macon, and joining me today are Demolition Derby champ, paleo-erotic photographer, and president of the United States in the suspiciously non-evil universe, Amanda Sisk.
Hello, hello, hello. And for today's show, I would like to be referred to as a Mandalorian Sith.
Oh, very well. We also have interpretive dancer, omelet cartographer, and hopscotch baron Noah Diamond. Thanks for joining us again, Noah.
Very happy, as always, to be here. I should point out that because it is as hot as Mustafar here and pretty much everywhere, my lighting is a little different tonight. I didn't drag out the usual lights, which make it about 5 degrees warmer, which could very easily kill me. So I'm being lit this evening in a style I call Noah Noir.
Excellent. Your safety comes first, and may the Hoth be with you. So, Solo.
Yes, Solo.
Solo. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I want to say about this is, even as someone that was and has always been a pretty big, heavy Star Wars nerd, I don't think anyone really wanted this movie to be made. I mean, I can't think of anyone ever saying, I really want a Han Solo movie more than anything.
It didn't occur to me. I was ambivalent.
Yeah, I kind of felt, and I always really liked Han Solo as a character. I just never really thought, I need that explored.
I think you're right about that, absolutely. And on top of that, the movie was released at a time when even a Star Wars movie that we were all really excited about seeing, it would have been a slightly tough sell for me. We had just gotten all excited about Last Jedi and Force Awakens and Rogue One in a space of just a couple of years. And I remember seeing, like, when the trailer came out for Solo, I was like, oh, there's a trailer for Solo. You know, it didn't feel like an exciting must-see event the way all the other recent ones did. And I think Star Wars fatigue more than anything else might be the reason.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of Star Wars fatigue. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that said a Han Solo movie directed by Opie. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
And the genesis of the movie's, creative team was, we heard about that all while it was happening, that originally Phil Lord and Christopher Miller of the Lego Movie and other things, especially other irreverent pop culture things, were the original directors from a screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan and his son. And I guess they were making a movie that was tonally not what Disney wanted or not what Lucasfilm thought was consistent with the series. And Ron Howard was brought in to do a workmanlike job.
Right. So all these things said, I think I went in with pretty low expectations. I don't know about the two of you, but I kind of went in just thinking, I'm going to see a Star Wars movie. There will be Chewbacca, if nothing else. But I'm really, not expecting Citizen Hut.
I'm not big on reading about things before I see them or learning about them, or I like, seeing it or hearing it, and then I dive into all the stuff. So I knew nothing about Solo, and the thing is, it was like I never wanted to see the movie so that I could learn. It just it was on. We didn't see it in the theater, and it was on demand for a while before we watched it. It was like, oh, do you want to watch Solo? Sure. I don't know why. I mean, I don't think it had a fair shot in the first place, because Star Wars fatigue is a real thing, as someone said, but I don't think it was given a fair shot, but I also don't think it was a very good Star Wars story. It wasn't a Star Wars story. It's a fine movie, but it was...
No, I mean, I guess I disagree with that. I kind of went into it thinking it wasn't going to be that great, and I ended up generally liking it, and the more times I've watched it, the more I've liked it.
Do you feel like it fits into the Star Wars universe the way that every other film does?
Well, I do, but I think I come to this movie with a lot of really old Star Wars baggage clinging to it, and this movie is definitely the most minutia fan servicey movie that is out there in terms of Star Wars. Like, it really makes... So first of all, you have you have stuff that is references to this book that I just reread. This is Han Solo at Star's End. So this was, I think, the second book of Star Wars that was published that was expanded stories beyond the movies. So this was only the first film was out. And so I devoured this as a kid. And it kind of, delves into Solo and Chewbacca's early days as smugglers. And it's kind of like, hard-boiled sci-fi that's trying to be sort of like a noir novel. That's more fun than I thought it would be. Like when rereading it, I figured this was going to be kind of terrible and almost unreadable because I haven't read it since I was like 13. But it was readable. I liked it. So that's kind of where I kind of started to really fall in love with the idea of Solo. And I've got Han Solo in the corporate sector. This kind of outlines the political stuff that was going on in those old. So this was before any of the Clone Wars. We knew what it was. Going back that far was kind of risky ground for people to be doing Star Wars stuff with.
The corporate sector.
The corporate sector, yeah. So basically, the corporate sector. This is you're luring me into nerddom I don't want to go into, but basically, in the days of the Republic, corporations would buy planets that didn't have a population so that they could kind of do whatever they wanted there without worrying about local laws because there wasn't already a culture there that could impose laws on them. And then they just had to report directly to Republic laws. And then eventually the Empire took over the corporate sector and used it to do all sorts of nefarious things.
Yes, the corporate sector.
So, but basically, I'm sure that the writers of this kind of referred to this a little bit as they were going back into the history of Solo. And they really, really referenced several times the Lando Calrissian books. So Lando keeps talking about his old exploits in this movie. So there's Lando Calrissian in the Mind Harp of Sheru. He mentions that lost the temple on Sheru. Lando Calrissian in the Flame Wind of Ocean, which if you eat the wrong burritos.
Oh my gosh, this Flame Wind.
The Flame Wind.
The Flame Wind of Shamu.
I loved Lando Calrissian and The Prisoner of Azkaban.
So anyway, I guess I kind of felt like this movie was exactly the kind of Star Wars movie. 13-year-old in me really wanted to see this specific movie. And so on that level, it worked.
I find that the movie itself it's not bad. I mean, and that's the first point I find myself making about it all the time. It's not bad, but that alone makes it a little different from the other canonical Star Wars movies. None of the others do I begin by saying, it isn't actually bad, and it is, as Amanda touched on, it's the only live action Star Wars movie that I didn't see in the theater when it came out. That's another measure of like just that the totally independent of the movie itself and its merit. It just wasn't time to go to the theater and see a Star Wars movie when this came.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
but the movie itself is, it's very competently done and it has plenty of good stuff in it. Also, some things that I think are missteps. I'm sure we'll discuss it as we discuss it. But one of the things about it is that it does have an obligatory feeling to it. I'm completely willing to admire the references and Easter eggs and fan service and regard for the minutia of Star Wars lore. But whenever it makes a big point along those lines, it feels very, I don't know, it's questions. How did Han meet Chewie? How did Han get the Millennium Falcon? How did he meet Lando? Why is he called Han Solo? It's sort of has a very paint by numbers approach to those big questions.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, there are a lot of those moments where I either roll my eyes or wince. I mean, especially where he gets his name, it just seems completely arbitrary. It doesn't seem like much thought at all was put into that.
It's also sort of like, is it an origin story for Han Solo? It seems to be what would take place right after his origin story. And we still know very little about his actual origins. We meet him, I guess he's supposed to be 17 in those early sequences. I think if he were a little boy, then this Dickensian orphan childhood might be a little more compelling.
I think that they might have wanted to avoid the little boy thing because they didn't want another Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
I can understand being shy about that.
Yeah.
And for like a few seconds there, I was, oh, here we go. My side's being directed by David Lynch.
I think it's Cinema Sins who said, oh no, I can't find it never mind, because you guys almost got, never mind, I'm lost, because you almost got me a bingo, but then you didn't.
Oh, should we rewind and try to bingo?
Jake Lloyd was going to be a bingo, and so I was about to ring it, and then I realized, no, Jake Lloyd's not down there. I didn't actually do it, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
For those just tuning in for the first time, Amanda Sisk plays.
Yes, I play a bingo, Star Wars Buzzword bingo. So if you hear the bell, we'll know that someone has said something that I have on my bingo sheets. But CinemaSins said, like, of his backstory, all of the important stuff in Han's life happens in a week.
Yeah.
And CinemaSins, I would recommend everybody go there on YouTube. It's all the good things and all the bad things about all these movies in 18 minutes or less. And this one is, it's very good.
Okay.
And I'll reference this one a lot.
Among the things that are disagreed about with this movie a lot is the central performance, Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. Where do you guys land on him? I've heard people express the gamut of opinions. He's very believable as the young Han Solo. He's nothing like Harrison Ford. He's uncannily like Harrison Ford. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think in terms of like the variety of opinions on that, I think part of it is that Solo is a character that people project a lot of things onto, and therefore probably have a lot of personal and complicated and maybe stupid ideas about him, or maybe beautiful ideas about him, and then any new interpretation of him that isn't Harrison Ford might fall short for that. Well, yeah, I don't know. For me, I was apathetic to the performance. I think it's fine, but I'm not completely impressed. I'm not really that bothered by it. It's fine. There's enough Harrison Ford in there for it to work for me, and not too much that it makes me feel it's too forced. And it's an awkward position for any actor to be in.
I agree with that. I agree that it's an awkward position, but I think that for this particular movie, definitely for this character, it can't be someone bringing their own spin or the spirit of Han Solo, because the spirit of that character is so generic and is the same spirit as so many other characters. This is swashbuckling, blah, blah, blah. You've really got to copy Harrison Ford, is what I think, in order to pull this off. And this kid, to me, some people really think he looks like Harrison Ford. I do not. I don't think he's anything like Harrison Ford. I think at some point in the movie, he makes the Stella Adler decision to start squinting because he doesn't trust people anymore. And that's when he keeps it, which is what Harrison Ford does the whole time. He squints. But I mean, I think he's a fine actor, and I do think it's just, I mean, who's going to step into this? But I think they could have found somebody better.
Well, I don't doubt this. Yeah, you could have found someone better, but I was okay with it.
Yeah, I feel like it's not a bad performance. Same thing with the movie. It's not bad. He's good. He delivers a good, charismatic performance. And there are times when there's, maybe just enough of a flash of familiar Han Solo affect to sell it. But I think it's a little awkward that we're not that much younger than he is when we met him in episode 4.
Yeah, it's about 10 years young.
10 years before episode 4. So that stretches the believability a little bit. And then I also can't help but think that despite the charm and competence of Alden Ehrenreich, maybe what was interesting about Han Solo really was Harrison Ford. As you point out, Amanda, the character itself is rather a stock character, nicely written and everything, but it's really Harrison Ford's just movie star quality and sort of neo Bogart screen presence that turned that character into a very compelling figure. And maybe the character is not inherently interesting without that performance. I sort of felt that way. It also, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but it seems like that there was a choice to give Han an origin story that lines him up with Luke very closely. He's an orphan. He dreams of flying in the stars.
Well, I mean, he's not. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say he's actually an orphan in that his birth isn't necessarily so mysterious. I mean, he talks about having a father that built ships, so he at least did have kind of a youth with his family at some point. It sounds like maybe it wasn't the nicest family life, but
group of orphans.
But yeah, I mean,
and Luke wants to fly, and how are they going to get out of where they're getting out of? Yeah, I mean, they do seem to be trying to line that up somewhat, I think. But yeah, you look 10 years into the future, and you don't see Harrison Ford in that kid yet. You don't think that kid's made it that far. I don't think. In 10
I
years.
do think that the idea was maybe to do like a couple to a trilogy of these where he would inch closer to being more like that Harrison Ford version of Solo, but due to the lack of popularity of this, it didn't really happen.
I think you're
It
right.
looks that way.
But I also think that part of what this was to set up is maybe the Mandalorian TV show. When we were watching all of that mall stuff today, I kind of started thinking, I think what they're doing with this is setting up that show.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also read just a few weeks ago, there was a report. I think this was in in the Grain of Salt journal, saying that Disney was developing an Obi-Wan series with Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
That might also continue some of this story of the crime syndicates, and we know that Darth Maul is tied in with Obi-Wan's story.
Right. That would be fun. I would enjoy that. And for what I've heard, the creative team behind The Mandalorian, they've finished filming the first season, and they're so happy with it that they just started filming the second.
Yeah, Jon Favreau, who was the writer and director on The Mandalorian, or the show,
and who starred as Rio in this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, the story may be continued in some way, but I do think one of the defects of Solo as a movie is that it does feel a little bit incomplete for the express purpose of they were trying to set up a trilogy or a spin-off series. And that's too bad, because the virtue of the Star Wars story entries was that they were going to be standalone adventures. And in a way, I wonder if they didn't.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that you have standalone adventures like Rogue One and things like that, and that's wonderful. But I think the separate Star Wars stories don't necessarily need to be just one-shots, and that's it. I think the main appeal of them is that they're not directly connected to the Skywalker family. It's not episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't necessarily have to follow those structures as rigidly. So you could do another trilogy or something outside of that has its own kind of style, but is still in the Star Wars universe.
I certainly don't agree with that. I don't disagree with that. That certainly sounds like a reasonable approach. But I still think watching Solo, it sort of feels like the creative team was saying, let's not develop our central character too much. We might want to do another one of these.
Yeah.
And I sort of wish that they had gone all in and made a great character study of this character if they were going to do it. But yeah, in theory, I mean, if they had done that, then maybe the world would have demanded another Han Solo movie.
Maybe, but at some point I'm starting to feel like, how many times are you going to re-release Let It Be so that I have to buy it again?
Yeah.
Now you got the show, and I had to watch the Clone Wars so I could understand what the hell was going on with Darth Maul and the hologram. And
yeah. Well, Phil Spector messed it up with strings and a choir.
Darth Maul got ripped at the hands of Phil Spector. I don't know. Yes, I'm going to concede. I want to see the movies, and I like hearing some of the backstory, and I like learning some of the backstory. But if they came out with a solo trilogy, I don't know if I'd be excited about it.
I don't think I would be excited, but I would probably just enjoy it as much as I could.
And I guess that is our approach to Solo. I mean, I saw it when it was available to watch in my home, and then we've watched it maybe 3 times with varying levels of attentiveness to prepare for this tonight. And every time I think like, oh, this isn't bad. Oh, that was a nice moment. It has. Should we talk about some of the things that are good about it? I think. Obviously, Donald Glover is spectacular as Lando.
I saw a cute story about him that apparently, when he got the part, he was just super excited because he was, not just a Star Wars nerd, but specifically a Lando nerd. And that was like the first action figure his dad bought him. And, Lando was like a big figure in his life. And so he knew he was going to get to meet Billy D. Williams and talk about the character, and he just said, I studied up on read all this old Lando material and looked through old comics and books and stuff, and I came up with all these theories, maybe he came from this planet, and then he had this plan and was doing that, and I go to Billy D. Williams and start telling him all of this stuff that I was thinking of, and he went, "Hey kid, shut up, just be smooth."
I can hear him saying that. I think Donald Glover, like Ewan McGregor before him, strikes the perfect balance between impersonating the original actor in his role and creating a truly whole and personal performance out of it. It's a perfect balance. Maybe Alden Ehrenreich doesn't quite get that McGregor factor quite perfect, but Donald Glover...
McGregor factor.
He does, right? Ewan McGregor somehow he evokes Alec Guinness just as much as you want him to, but he also fully inhabits the role, and it doesn't come off as an imitation. And Donald Glover too. I mean, there's moments where he's a kind of chillingly close to Billy D. Williams, especially in his vocal sound. But he is that character, and I think the movie really picks up at that moment about. It's pretty far into the movie, after the Corellia sequence and then after the train heist, which is a long sequence. The Lando scene is when my interest in this movie kicks in.
I totally agree. I mean, I do love the train heist in that it's very much a Western trope that is done in a really fun way. I like how stark the colors are. I think it's really nicely shot and it's exciting and fun. But when Lando shows up, that's when the color shows up and I start paying more attention. I want his entire wardrobe.
Yeah, it's fun to see the back and all of that shiny.
Well, before we go there, then let us talk about the train heist since you brought it up. I found it thrilling to watch, and I think it's just from a design point of view, just from the design and the way it turns, and then of course the way everybody fell, and knowing how much of this was CGI and how much of it was real, and a lot of it was real, amazingly. I mean, a lot of this shit was real, and I didn't realize how much of it was in camera. But I thought that train heist was beautifully designed. And it also is the second time I could reference Mad Max. The first time was The Orphans. This time it's the Rock Riders look a lot like, what's her name? Investus, what's her name?
Enfys Nest?
Enfys Nest, yes. I remember that. Yes, they look a lot like her and her gang, so that's another Mad Max reference. But I really like the way that whole thing looked. I could watch it a lot.
Just incidentally, I just want to throw this out there as a super nerddom thing, but her group, the Cloud Riders, is the name of her band of marauders. And that was originally the name of a swoop gang in the Star Wars comics led by a guy named Sergi X Aragontus. Just so you know.
Well, I figured.
They remind me of the Rock Riders in Mad Max. So.
They are very much like that, yeah.
This Rock Riders, Cloud Riders, whatever.
Cloud Rock Riders.
So that's how I felt about the train heist. I will say I don't like Sandy Newton at all, so not a problem.
You were happy to see her uselessly blow herself
I
up?
wouldn't say happy, but I mean, you're like, okay, we got to sacrifice.
Oh.
About now. It's about time for somebody to die. It's going to be.
I gotta say, I felt I really love her, and I was kind of mad. It was like, you know what? I get to love her for like 2 seconds, and then she explodes.
We also meet Woody Harrelson's Tobias Beckett, who is positioned as Han Solo's mentor. But if this is the mentor character who is so important to Han Solo's formative adventures, and he does turn out to be just that, especially in his last scene. I'm not sure. I might have liked to see more of a connection between this character and the older Han who we know. I love Woody Harrelson because I'm human, and loving Woody Harrelson is just part of being a member of our species. But I do think he's just gives the same performance these days for every epic he shows up for. His character in Solo doesn't seem notably different from his character in The Hunger Games.
Or Cheers, for that matter, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's okay. As I say, I genuinely love him. He's a performer who anything he's in is better because he's in it. But I don't know. Maybe he could have taken the trouble to create a slightly more Star Wars-ish character for himself here, particularly one that resonates with the lessons Han absorbs from.
How does one make oneself more Star Wars-ish?
I don't know. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Like the way we were talking in a previous episode about Greg Proops and his vocal performance in Phantom Menace. I mean, he's a very good performer. I love Greg Proops. He has an interesting vocal quality, but for some reason, him doing his usual thing in a Star Wars context sounds.
Now, what if Greg Proops had played Beckett, though?
Even the
movie.
What's that?
It would have been a whole different movie. It might have been the movie that they wrote the first time around before.
All right, it's not working. Let's get rid of Proops. Get Harrelson in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what if it had been not Woody Harrelson, but Woody Allen?
Oh.
Anyway, I think, nothing wrong really with the Woody Harrelson performance, but it is kind of Woody Harrelson showing up and doing his usual thing in a role that I think the whole premise that this is the early adventures of Han Solo might have been helped if the mentor figure resonated more strongly with the Han he becomes.
So by that you mean the mentor character should be more Han-like, more like the Han from A New Hope, like?
Maybe, or if maybe not necessarily in obvious surface ways, but it seems like in the prequel trilogy, there's a lot about mentors and students. Well, all the Star Wars movies, really. I don't know, the way some of the other Palpatine apprentices seem like stops on the road to Vader. I mean, the movie tells us that Beckett is Han's mentor, and Han learns a little something about how to, survive in the galaxy from Beckett. But the character in The Last Jedi, there's a character in The Last Jedi who feels a little bit more Han Solo-like.
Can we talk about young?
Oh, are you talking about?
I'm blanking on the actor's name, and I'm trying to look it up before you. He's a great actor, but I'm blanking on his name. Yes. Anyway, but there is a
Benicio del Toro.
That's right. Benicio del Toro plays a kind of smuggler outlaw character in The Last Jedi, and you think he's a very Han Solo-like character. But I wouldn't necessarily have thought that about Tobias Beckett.
Do you mean based on the performance that not Woody Allen gave us?
That's right.
I think we should compare this entire movie to the first 25 minutes of Young Indiana Jones, or whatever that movie is.
Young Indiana Jones?
You mean the first sequence of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade?
Oh, yeah, that's very different from Young Indiana Jones, which was a vitamin-packed, you're gonna fucking learn shit, kids.
No,
history down your throat.
we learned so much and so many things, and they got all the fan service out of the way. But it's like in 25 minutes, and you got a whole lot more than this. But
well, okay, if River Phoenix was still around to play young Han Solo,
it's really not.
River.
It's not really a point. It's just natural to make a comparison, I think. Plus, I think River Phoenix did a much better job of becoming a character that Harrison Ford created.
River Phoenix did a much better job of being a human being than the rest of us, so we should just leave it at that. River.
Done. Copy.
So we've been watching all of the Star Wars movies with our friend Alina, who had never really seen them. She's, like a lot of people that have somehow magically not really seen Star Wars, she kind of has a passing understanding of who some of the major characters and things are. But she's been watching them in chronological order with us as we've been doing the Faces of Stone broadcasts. And getting to this one, she really connected with it a lot more than the first three, which is probably true for a lot of people. But the character that she loved hands down more than any other Star Wars character so far was L3.
Uh-huh.
And I gotta say, L3 is a real highlight for me of this movie.
Me too. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge does a beautiful job with it.
It's an amazing job.
Yeah.
And again, like a great management of the tech team, allowing her to give her physical performance on the set in most cases, and just merge that with the, digital effects.
And it's they had to, because she's got such a vigor about her. She's like got the, vibrating with electricity, her voice and her body, and it translated through to this thing that it wouldn't have had it just been CGI. Like, she really made these emotions. It was nice. It was like Daniels in that suit. Like, it's kind of old fashioned,
Yeah, it worked really well, and she was just a delight. Her comic timing was fantastic.
Right.
And I love the, watching it, 3 or 4 times now, it seems like it's really kind of blatant. But the first time I watched it, I didn't really feel it was that blatant. That she's clearly has the personality of the Millennium Falcon, and in the movies following, the sassiness that ship has, and 3PO saying, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has a most peculiar dialect.
Yes.
That she's just cussing him out, like.
Yeah, I really liked that. That all worked for me, and L3 is a great character. And it's interesting that both Solo and Rogue One, which will be discussed, the next film we'll be discussing, it was made before Solo, but chronologically comes after it. Rogue One and Solo both have these kind of droids with attitude characters that are, heavily motion capture performances, and they're kind of droids who are sort of snippy and pissy and resent their machine status in some way, and have a jealous feeling about their relationships with their human,
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a droid personality that's been pretty prevalent in the extended universe stuff from fairly early on. Like, I guess people get their hands on the Star Wars universe, and one of the first things they want to do is have a bitchy droid.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
I've always liked the fact that Star Wars they've never bothered to explain droids too much, like
no.
In the films, whereas Star Trek has gone the other way and gotten really interestingly into the question of artificial intelligence. Star Wars has once no part of that. These droids are basically living characters, and that's that.
Right. But also, kind of...
we want. We're in charge. We're definitely in charge still.
Yeah.
But I mean, the appliance pet nature of them is really fascinating. And when I was looking through this little, guidebook of all the Solo stuff, let me see if I can find this. Okay, so here's all the droids that L3 lets go and, freeze. And each of them has their different functions. And I think it was when the repurposed repair assistant.
Yes, from the Jawas.
But I just realized that how beautifully not that useful droids are. I mean, they're doing something that our phones might do, yet they're this giant, cumbersome, walking, gonking thing. rather than just have a little cart you can scoot around for your tools, you're going to have this cumbersome robot that tumbles around and might short circuit. There is no logical reason to have this.
Another thing to be said about that moment when she starts taking all the restraining bolts off and everything that Cinema Sins brought up, which is absolutely true. Okay, the restraining bolts come off, but that wouldn't change their programming, and they wouldn't just suddenly turn into little assholes. Like, that's what happened.
Well, they may have been assholes before.
All the restraining bolts come off, and suddenly they're like destroying shit. They're like little anarchist droids. I mean, like, what the fuck?
They might have some really messed up programming. They had.
Apparently.
Well, I mean, they are merely by virtue of being Star Wars droids, they may well be programmed to be fearful, neurotic, jealous, angry. L3 even suggests that droids can have sex with humanoids when she confidently tells Emilia Clarke's character it works. I mean, that's a very strange moment, and that feels like, oh, maybe that's what the Miller and Lord version would have been more like, like I don't know, that sounds to me like a droid saying, well, I have a vagina, so.
Yeah, I don't think it sounds to you like that. That's definitely what it was.
Just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only one who heard it.
Yeah.
I have something that acts in a way a vagina or some other implement would that's going to make a person feel
right
in a good way.
Right.
That's better, but more inclusive.
Not less concise, more descriptive.
I apologize for my cis heteronormative take on human droid sex.
But speaking of which, another nice thing about this movie is it's definitely the queerest Star Wars movie so far. I mean, Lando flirts with Han pretty openly, calls him baby a few times. And, the droid sex thing is pretty kinky, too.
It is pretty kinky. And she talks, like, they make a joke about her G-spot.
Yes. You're going to have to do that thing later.
And she says, I don't think you could find it.
Right. And there's
and also
a line about Lando's prodigious ... There's an unusual number of dick jokes in this, and it's just a little like Star Wars doesn't tend to go there. In episode,
yeah, I'm okay with Star Wars going there, especially with Glover. But I think that I also love the scene where L3 is cutting through the fence, and she can't
perform while you're watching. I can feel you watching.
I can feel, and I mean, really, the way that was written is not fantastic. It's the way that she performs it that is just so perfect. She just really sells it.
She's really good. She's really, really good in that role.
Yeah, excellent.
Another thing is also on the queer front is that, like, this is in a lot of ways a romance between Han and Chewbacca. I mean, there's a fair amount of that. I mean, they kind of go through the romantic comedy formula of we hate each other when we first meet, we fight, and then we're stuck together for some reason and end up to really digging each other. It's pretty sweet.
And Joonas Suotamo, I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, the Finnish actor's name who shared the role of Chewbacca with Peter Mayhew in Force Awakens. And
he is a 7-foot snack.
He is excellent. I mean, I do think Solo, in a way, is one of Chewbacca's best performances. He's really wonderful in it. And there's also something nice about Chewbacca in the sense that he is utterly convincing as his younger self.
Yes.
Chewbacca looks great. He's exactly like Chewbacca.
10 years to Chewbacca is nothing.
Right.
As he is now 190 years old.
Yeah, the Han Chewie stuff was pretty great, I thought, in general. Although I did think it was very strange in the scene where they meet, mud wrestling, how romantic. They meet and Han speaks Wookiee to Chewie in order to convey that he knows how. It's a little strange because Han and Chewie have been communicating all our lives with Han speaking English and Chewie grunting in Wookiee. We never hear Han say a word in Wookiee, do we, in the original trilogy?
No, we don't.
It just seems so strange. Why are we doing that here?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I just as like an archivist, it makes me a little uncomfortable because it's like, well, then now we need to learn how Han fucking learned Wookiee.
Yeah, that too. Like,
You know, like what he was a street kid on Corellia, and then there was this big worm played by Linda Hunt, and then he learned Wookiee before he became a pilot. Or wait, maybe there was an obligatory language course in the Imperial Academy. You had to learn at least one Outer Rim language.
yeah, they might have explained that, but also they might have just found some other way of conveying that Han can understand Chewie. That never had to be explained before. We've been now through 4 movies with Han and Chewie where we never questioned why they can communicate. We just accepted it. And so having it laboriously and clumsily illustrated here was, I thought, a defect. But in general, the Chewie stuff is quite good. I love when he tells him his name and he says, his subtitle says, "I am Chewbacca, son of Itchy Wook," or whatever it is.
Atticus?
Something like that, yeah.
Atticus or something like that.
Yeah, it was changed to Itchy at Ellis Island.
Yes.
Itchy has a streaming pornography problem.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That thing.
We will get to the holiday special sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Just you wait. That's coming up pretty soon.
What about the dice? The retconning of the now crucially important dice. An incidental set detail on episode 4. It's never mentioned or referenced, but there are these dice hanging there on the Falcon. They made the dice into a bit of a thing in a pretty nice way, I think, in The Force Awakens. But now we're really planting them in Han's origin story. And when he and Kira are separated early on in Solo, the fact that she has the dice with her tells us right away that they will see each other again, because we know Leia will wind up.
We know that those dice are going to end up in Leia's hands and then also disappear. But anyway, I mean, it's another kind of thing where I feel like, because there was so much time that the writers were trying to spend away from central Star Wars stories that they really couldn't touch at the time that the movies were still coming out. Han's dice were kind of a big deal in the extended material, and so seeing them focused on in this way, it trips the right triggers for me. They were supposedly the dice he won the Millennium Falcon with, as the lore went.
Oh, but we now know that not to be the case.
Yes.
It's a little bit...
Well, I mean, I guess we don't know that definitely to be the case, but...
Doesn't he win the Falcon in the Sabacc game with Lando?
Yeah, but you need dice to play Sabacc. I don't know if those dice come off the... But okay. You have cards, and in fact, I have my Sabacc set here. Yeah, this is Sabacc from, like 1989 or something like that. But these are the Sabacc cards.
Wow, they look a little different.
They're very tiny and stupid. Yeah. Anyway, it's a playable game that isn't entirely unfun.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's the end of my Sabacc thing.
Well,
other than the fact that my friends and I used to walk around going Sabacc, Sabacc, da 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 Sabacc.
Because that's not me at all.
The retconning of the dice makes me think about how it is sort of interesting that we got The Force Awakens and then Solo just, a couple of years after that. And so after having no new big screen Han Solo presence since Return of the Jedi, we got in fairly short time to see the end of his life and career, and seeing him as this old man version of Han Solo, and indeed seeing his death in Force Awakens. And then shortly after that, it's like, well, and here's the other end of his career, the beginnings. It almost doubled the amount of Han Solo.
It's more Solo for your money.
Yeah. and the dice, the dice have clearly are. It just was a coincidence that we didn't hear much about them in the original trilogy. He was obviously thinking about them all the time,
constantly. Yeah.
To me, it's a somewhat. I mean, it's not a offensive defect, but it's a somewhat less ingenious version of what they did with L3 and the Falcon. Like, it's sort of planting it. This is what Rogue One does very successfully. I think, like, makes you think about these things later when you rewatch the more familiar movies. You know, when we get to the original trilogy, which I've avoided lately because I don't want to see it until we get to it.
Yeah,
but we'll be thinking about L3 a little bit, right? With regard to
right, sure.
That's nice.
Yeah. I really appreciated the visual design of this movie in general. I liked the cinematography. I liked the color palette, which was, you know, kind of alternately really sparse and really cluttered. I think some of the costume and set design is amazing. I really loved the club where I forget the name of it, but the club where they meet Lando. I really like all of that. I just love the way that it is, like kind of like a sportsman's hunt club and casino and bar and all of these things. And I like that while it does kind of give a nod to the old Mos Eisley Cantina, it's still very much its own environment, and that was really nice. I liked a lot of the creature design. I thought that they did some really fun things with that.
I agree.
There were some
good creatures.
There were a few times where I just felt like it was a little too dark and I couldn't quite see.
Yeah, I've been reading commentary about it lately. A number of people have commented on that. Yes, it is a very dark film. And looking at some of the bonus features, the lighting designer did talk about his preference for, real lighting.
Natural light that, and I do appreciate that. But I feel like in a lot of the scenes he was talking about, I liked the way that it worked. It was some of the action scenes that were really dark.
Yeah, it's like a Gordon Willis Star Wars movie.
And I especially felt like the other Wookiees that weren't Chewbacca in the lighting looked really strange.
Huh.
Seeing some pictures of those costumes out of that lighting, I don't think they look that weird. But in the lighting, it looks like, man, did they just get some extras from Planet of the Apes and slap them in there?
It's very interesting meeting Chewie. He's all wet and matted with mud, and we've never seen Chewie such a mess. It doesn't make it any more surprising. We kind of know automatically what's about to happen. But that scene is still fun, and it works out pretty nicely, despite my earlier criticism of the.
Yes. No, but I feel like I kind of like that. I think even if you'd never seen any Star Wars movie, I don't think anyone's going to go into that scene assuming that there's actually going to be a monster that Han is fighting. You can just sense that they're going to become friends, even if you have no context.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not that familiar with Star Wars, I think the first shot of his face, it's just so clear.
Right.
Oh, that's a face that's been a recognizable part of popular culture for more than 40 years. And there's also something about the way, if you are familiar with the original movies, it's very much like the scene with the Rancor in Return of the Jedi. We're going to drop you through the floor and feed you to a monster.
Yes, yeah. I dug the troopers in that scene too. I just want
to let you guys know I'm here. I'm just lying down a little bit for my back. I'm having a little back problem, but I'm listening and I'm talking. So. Okay,
well, shout out any responses you may have.
And I'll do my bingo thing from here.
Okay. Okay.
That was the disembodied voice of Amanda Sisk.
So let's talk about the Sith Lord in the room. We have Darth Maul showing up.
Indeed.
At the tail end of this film, which I think for a lot of people was a big surprise. And I honestly have not really looked into what responses to that have been. I don't really know how people have generally responded to that.
I think the general response to it, at least in terms of internet think pieces, was, you might have been surprised by Darth Maul showing up in the end of Solo, but that means you are not familiar with the Clone Wars animated series. I indeed was not. I have since been educated through the hard efforts of Marc-Anthony Macon.
Yeah, the hard
So,
linking
yeah.
efforts.
So yes, I think by the time I saw Solo, I already knew from reading spoilers that
Right.
Darth Maul would make an appearance, and I knew already that.
I did not.
Oh, good.
I was legitimately surprised when Darth Maul was there. Now, I was not surprised that Darth Maul was still alive at the time of this movie's, chronology, but I wasn't expecting him to show up in it. That was a big surprise for me.
It's also interesting, as we know, I never really have watched the Clone Wars series, except Amanda and I saw the first couple episodes once, and I've seen good chunks of it during this Faces of Stone experience, because you have thoughtfully provided a form of Clone Wars clips, footnotes to a lot of what we've been seeing. And I have to say, much of it seems quite interesting. It looks like it was largely a series. But that stuff with Darth Maul, it's fairly interesting, and
it's better than I would have expected it to be. Is really kind of how I feel about the Clone Wars in a lot of ways, and in some ways, I feel like it hits a really sweet spot in terms of nailing that kind of like inflated Flash Gordon serial style of adventure stories. I love the like blaring announcer at the beginning of the episode that's like "War on Mandalore," it kind of hits the sweet spot for me in that way. But then again, I mean, this is
narrator.
Right, but I mean, it is kind of a reaching sort of thing, especially where it's like, well, let's bring back Darth Maul, and I think that Clone Wars does some stuff where it really is like legitimately filling in some potholes that needed to be filled in, and they do so very nicely. And the Darth Maul thing kind of straddles that line a little bit, because it's not like Darth Maul needed to be filled in. He was dead, and we could have easily left him dead.
Yeah, it does seem like turns out he's alive, but then pretty quickly after that he gets killed again, or at least defeated by Sidious. But I mean,
he is not killed. Doesn't get killed by Sidious at that point, but
he just gets sort of apprehended.
I mean, I guess this is where we don't quite know what is going to be the outcome, because there's still another season of Clone Wars that's coming out eventually that hopefully will have the rest of that, or a bit more of that. But we do know how Darth Maul dies, ultimately. That's in one of the episodes of Rebels. And, I assume you're okay with me spoiling this for you?
It's fine. Yeah.
So, I mean, basically he searches for Kenobi, finds him on Tatooine, and they have another fight, and Kenobi kills him.
Oh, good.
So at least, and in a very like classic samurai style duel where it's not drawn out, it's like 2 hits and he's down. And
really?
That was very satisfying for me as a Kurosawa fan. It was a very Kurosawa fight. And Kenobi did this thing,
I love when he does that.
Yeah. I don't know why he does that. I don't know why I love it, but I do love it.
It's a good move.
The pointy thing.
Yeah, the little, I don't know, is he pointing at his opponent's eyes? Is he lining things up between his fingers? Is he just trying to freak them out by doing a little voodoo hand?
I think that's
what is that?
I think it's like make yourself bigger than the bear,
Okay, so it's his version of hissing and puffing up.
Yes, and he starts doing
But he
that.
smiles while he does it. It's so cute.
And in that split second where the person's going, what the fuck is he? And then right then he goes after him. They're about to say, what the fuck is he doing? And they never make it through because he's just bam right there.
He tricked them with the old 2-finger distract or not.
To get a seat on the subway. I'm going to try that tomorrow morning.
You're going to just point to strangers with your 2 fingers?
Well, when I'm getting onto the subway, if I see a seat available and I see somebody else getting on with me, I'll do that to that person. Throw them off balance.
It was a revelation for me in the Clone Wars clips that I watched this weekend. Not only does it turn out Darth Maul is alive after being cut in half in the Phantom Menace, he also has a brother, it turns out. And
who, like a lot of villains in Star Wars, has a very subtle name.
Savage.
His name is apparently Savage, spelled
Savage Opress. His name is Savage Opress.
Oh, jeez Louise.
But I think of him as Paul, Darth Paul.
I feel like his name is Paul.
Darth Darth Maul. He's like Darth Maul, but yellow.
And they have a cousin named Darth Saul, and they all work together at a moving company called Darth Hall. Ha ha ha. Thank you very much.
Excellent. We're here all week, folks.
So, I mean, but based on what happened in that, and considering that stuff is technically canon, it does seem like since the Mandalorian show is taking place around, I think it's supposed to be between Clone Wars and A New Hope.
Is that right?
I think so. So I'm wondering how much of it is going to relate to the stuff that has happened with Maul and Mandalore and all of that.
It ties in, doesn't it? It's not only in terms of Darth Maul, but also it seems in Solo, the world of these crime syndicates is also, this is a Clone Wars era story innovation.
Right. I mean, the syndicates seem to be a big part of it. It does seem like there was at least some attempts to tie these things together.
Which might be a good segue to talk about the villain in Solo, Dryden Voss.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, this is another one of the defects of this movie. I know that there was some recasting of this part. It was originally to be a semi-CGI sort of creature character, played in performance capture by Michael K. Williams of The Wire and the HBO Bessie Smith biopic and things like that. But he was not available for reshoots when Ron Howard reshot 70% of the film, and he was replaced with Paul Bettany. I feel like this is not, this doesn't feel like a Star Wars villain to me at all, Dryden Voss. It just seems like Paul Bettany playing an asshole in a black business suit. And I find he's effective as a performer. It's not that his performance is bad, but it feels like he wandered in from some other franchise.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. There's nothing, particularly bothersome or offensive about his performance, and the character isn't really terrible either. It just seems very out of place and really not hyperbolic enough to be the main antagonist in a movie like this.
I feel like this encapsulates the whole thing about it just not being a Star Wars movie. It's fine, but that guy's not a Star Wars villain. We don't have, it's just, everything about it just misses the mark, a little bit. It follows you can't just follow the path of a Star Wars movie and say it's a Star Wars movie, because so many movies and stories are made up of the same stepping stones. You can go back and reference your Joseph Campbell for that.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding. But so it has to be in the Star Wars universe. You have to feel Star Wars. You can't just depend on, a storyline to get you there.
But to be fair, what everyone feels is Star Wars is not going to line up.
No, but Paul Bettany is he's so, like we keep saying, everybody's a little contemporary these days. The contemporary characters don't work. I think that's what we're agreeing on.
Really? I don't think I feel that. I feel like there's one of the elements about Star Wars that does kind of work is having this kind of out of time element that is somewhat contemporary and somewhat antiquated and somewhat futuristic.
I feel like we were talking about like Troop. He was just a little too contemporary, and
yeah, Greg Proops. I agree that the Paul Bettany performance is one that has this problem. He comes across more as like the spoiled rich stepson on a soap opera, like that kind of asshole character.
I was also just confused by the striations on his face.
Yeah, it wasn't enough.
I thought it was going to be like explained somehow, and that was why he was going to be a Star Wars villain, but
no. It just felt like they didn't finish his makeup in time, and so they're like, just get on the stage, I don't know.
Yeah, he's got these horrible, he's a veiny face. Nobody knows that his makeup, but they just couldn't get it done in time.
In a way,
I think the idea is supposed to be his mood is affected, it gets darker when he's angry, or it's more prominent, which you could see if you're looking for it, but that's not that interesting.
It was, in some ways, more of a Star Trek kind of thing. Like, it's just a human, but we'll give him one weird feature.
Yes. His nose is just kind of wacky.
Yeah, it just has a little slit in his nose or something. Yeah, that was not. On the other hand, the villain in this piece did not have the outsized role that the villains tend to have in Star Wars. He's not really Han Solo's principal antagonist. He's just a bad guy on the way to resolving the story. So he doesn't need to be a Darth Sidious or Darth Vader level, antagonist. I just wish he felt more like an in-universe character than he does.
Yeah. Well, and I do wonder, what it would have been like had they gone ahead and gone with a more alien kind of crime boss. And I'm wondering if at some point in development he was supposed to be, rather than being Black Sun, or rather than being Crimson Dawn, he was supposed to be Black Sun, so he'd be one of those big green lizard guys with the top knots.
Oh. Is Crimson Dawn itself ever mentioned anywhere else? Because it wasn't in the Clone Wars stuff that I watched.
Crimson Dawn has been... I think the first mention of Crimson Dawn was in a novel called The Marriage of Princess Leia or The Wedding of Princess Leia or something, where... I'm not even kidding you. Through his use of strange pheromones, the Prince of Crimson Dawn... Or no, this was a Black Sun, so I'm wrong. It was Black Sun. But it was one of those lizard guys. He used pheromones to trick Princess Leia into doing political things and marrying him.
That old.
It's classic.
So vulnerable. You just spray some pheromones in my face, and I am yours.
Yeah.
It's like Kissinger and Nixon.
It was all lizard pheromones.
So one question we have from Mr. Another Cinema Sins is, okay, so if Han is so anxious to get away from the Imperial Army, and he's going to go AWOL, this is really the first time in 3 years he has had the opportunity to get out?
Yeah, it seems a little far-fetched. It's just trench after trench after trench, and then what are you going to do?
And he just, he seems like a pretty, proactive young man. I think he should have found another way to go at least, or it should have been indicated that he tried before and failed.
There was a cut scene with him doing, getting sentenced to go there because he was doing flying things wrong.
We do get to see some, he drops his shipment at the first sign of trouble.
He dropped his load. Ha 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 ha.
Yes, he drops his load solo. And then we also have of course, at the climax at the end of this film, he shoots first in a decisive moment.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that I would have expected to bug me, but I kind of liked the way that happened. It was fine.
I liked it, and I think Woody Harrelson was basically about to tell him, always shoot first. Basically, one more piece of advice, and Han shot him, and it was probably always shoot first.
Yeah.
Very well done.
I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it worked pretty well, and that was a good moment. It also was a big character moment. I mean, it's one of the most decisive things he does in the movie. It also occurred to me that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller shot first before Ron Howard took over and reshot.
Okay.
Another bit of lore.
All you ladies and gentlemen, aren't you jealous? I get to live with this thing and you don't.
Moving right along,
Put loose and fancy free.
I think another bit of long-standing Star Wars lore that was addressed in a very on-the-nose but satisfying way is the whole question of the Kessel Run
and the parsec issue. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read exactly what I think this is what Cinema Sin says, but he says it much better than I can. You really got to watch this guy's thing. His voice, everything's good. But fucking parsecs. Are they distance? Are they time? You don't know. The entire Star Wars canon doesn't know. It's And then they bring up the fact that Han always says this is the ship that made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Never says I did it. Says this is the ship that did it, which is totally going against Han's character, not to say like I did it in this ship. But,
well, he knows that if he disses L3, she's not going to fly him anywhere, so he's got to give her credit for mapping out the maw.
True, but fucking parsecs, are they distance, are they time? You don't know. I like that, because a lot of people, I think it's probably distance. What do you guys think?
I mean, in terms of like real astronomy stuff, it's definitely distance.
So the question used to be, maybe a parsec doesn't mean in this galaxy what it means in our world, the same way calamari means something different in their world.
Clearly.
Than it does in
different, but still kind of the same.
Yeah, oddly similar, but not really the same.
Then we can get into a third Mad Max parallel here, which is going through the Kessel Run. It seems to me that the shorter the distance, it's basically point A to point B is the shortest distance possible, but that's also the most dangerous route.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out.
And that element's been established in Star Wars lore for a long time. I mean, it was, pretty early on, some nerds said, you guys, parsec is a measurement of distance, not time. And so someone came in and said, well, it's just that, you need to go around all these dangers in the Kessel Run.
He does, and he goes through.
Right.
The same as in Mad Max Fury Road, when instead of going around or waiting, they go right into the dust storm. And it even looks the same when they're inside it. It's smoothie.
But unlike, I think, though, unlike Fury Road, I mean, this one has something we haven't seen in Star Wars since Return of the Jedi, which is a really weirdly vaginal danger.
Vaginal what?
Danger, menace,
yes.
Tentacle creature.
Yes, always.
It's this big void that and a tentacle, and it's.
Well, there's always a bigger fish. There's always a bigger fish.
There is always a bigger fish.
L3 assures us that it works.
It works.
It works.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's a big difference between, I don't know, like this kid and Tom Hardy. So we can move on from there.
Yeah, okay.
Don't you think, I always thought that of all the terminology in the Star Wars world, Kessel, not only as in the Kessel Run, but also the spice mines of Kessel, which was a place 3PO was afraid of being exiled to in the original film. Mm-hmm. Kessel is one of the more Jewish-sounding Star Wars words. And don't you think it would have been nice if in Spaceballs there had been something about like making the Kugel run?
It could happen in Spaceballs 3.
Google. But never mind, I'm not even going to go there. Okay, this is another thing that I think will spark a little discussion from Cinema Sins. Direct quote, Lady Proxima is a prawn, essentially. Marc-Anthony?
She's my favorite prawn, then. I'm not going to lie.
I know.
Sometimes I just put that Blu-ray in and I just watch Lady Proxima over and over and over again. I love Lady Proxima.
He also says something that I said before I watched this, but he says it better, is I can totally see how she came to power in this almost completely above land society. Now, okay, so she can't see the sun and she's underwater most of the time. What power exactly does she have?
She has little like snake serpents that bite people and hypnotize them with their saliva.
Where are they?
They're in the pool with her, and then they do her bidding, and they slither around, and it's like a drug addiction.
If she is a prawn, couldn't she have simply been played by Pepe, the king prawn?
I would like Pepe the King Prawn to be in everything.
Yeah, he would have been a great Proxima.
And how much money did they spend making that thing? They see once.
Well, I mean, just her bling alone must have cost a pretty penny. She's quite blung out.
It's yeah, I mean she is, and she's got all the it's jingly and jangly, and then she like swishes down and big time, big time. Gee, let's go into this again. That so much of this movie, I have respect so much that it was shot in camera by the real people, and that you know the hyperspace when they went into hyperspace.
Yeah.
Video. Of
Yeah.
Hyperspace, which excuse me, must just be amazing.
It's really got to be like you're not sleeping when you get home that night. You're just gonna sit there and see the hyperspace lines.
You're like, I was in the ship and I pushed that little lever, and when I did,
Right.
all the lines.
Well, I guess that's not hyperspace. That's light speed. It's
Light.
hyperspace is the boo 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 boo.
Yeah, the
Cloudy
blue
stuff.
clouds.
Yeah.
But yes, the idea that the actors were actually on an extremely high production value
Yes.
amusement park ride in a way, and that must have helped them.
And they did so many of their own stunts, and like I mean, you could consider all that walking on the rotating train stunt work, and they did it all. And like Chewie fucking flew all over the place. If you watch some of the bonus features and you watch the featurette about him,
Yeah.
flying through the air, and that scene, of course, the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful scene where Chewie finally just gets to let go and he goes to save the other Wookiees, and he just shoots that man up in the air right into the ceiling. And I mean, everybody, you just have to laugh at it. You just have to go, yes, Chewie, yes, and laugh at him.
It's so cathartic. I mean, yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that scene because it really is a lot of fun. And it's, you know, we've heard a lot about Wookiees and Chewbacca specifically just kind of going nuts. But we haven't seen much of that in any Star Wars movie. And this is the first time, I think, as you said earlier, Noah, we really get to see Chewie being Chewie in ways that we only imagined before. And it's really satisfying.
Yeah, it's a Chewie comes off very well in this movie.
Yeah.
I have a good feeling about this. It's a nice that it's a very indulgent reference, but I loved that, and I also thought, yeah, I have a good feeling about this as a reference to the original films. It's like, well, they had to put that in one way or another. But is this the first Star Wars movie that does not have an appearance by R2-D2 or C-3PO?
I think it is.
They were sort of shoehorned into Rogue One in a somewhat beside the point cameo, which made me think, well, they have to put them in every movie somehow.
Yeah, but they did not in this.
Yeah, they're not here.
I think that they did in this film. I have a note that they retrofit a lot, and I mean, the perfect example of this, the most blatant example of this, is the dice. But you can complain about that, but they didn't retrofit enough in the prequels, so that you ended up with things that didn't make any sense. And
everything makes perfect sense as long as you accept that Obi-Wan Kenobi lies his ass off.
What about Leia?
And the father
also lies her ass off.
Okay, yeah, all right. So yeah, I guess it is all you can accept everything if you think Obi-Wan's just a crazy motherfucking old man. Yes, but that kind of undermines everything we're talking about right now.
Okay.
But yeah, I think they did put enough in to make us. Some people really hated it. They called it fan service or whatever. I think that they had to put some stuff in there.
I think enough of it works that I'm not really upset.
No.
But it certainly could have been better.
Yes.
How could it not be fan service? I mean, you're making a movie about the adventures when he was younger of one of the most beloved characters from one of the most beloved series in the history of cinema. The very exercise is itself inherently fan service.
That's what it's about in a lot of ways.
I like the fact that it sort of leaned into that.
I did too. And as I said, close to the beginning, I really love how loving its nods to a lot of the original extended universe material was. That just was fun for me and nostalgic for me. And especially because in those early days, I think that a lot of writers doing Star Wars stuff liked using Han as a character because they didn't have to deal with the Jedi stuff so much, which wasn't really fleshed out much at all. And so Han was a character people could more easily adapt into situations that made sense.
Oh, that's worth mentioning too. You bring up a good point. This movie doesn't have any discussion of the Force. The Force is not a factor here. The Jedi are not really part of this story at all. The Darth Maul cameo at the end, we see his lightsaber briefly, which makes it, we can't quite say that there are no lightsabers in this movie, but that whole corner of Star Wars this isn't about that.
Yeah, and I mean that's in line with a lot of the early Han Solo stuff that was supposed to be harkening back to pre A New Hope, and it's I think it's fitting for Solo's character to have a movie that is that way, because by the time we meet him, he's like, what, the Force? What are you jerk-offs talking about? The Force.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why this movie, despite its virtues, does feel to me so much lighter and less important than the other Star Wars movies. Maybe that's it. It doesn't deal with the part of the Star Wars universe and story that is heavy and has gravity and has this enigmatic metaphysical discussion running through it. Maybe that's it exactly. This really is just a space adventure.
Which is why it's not a Star Wars story. It's just a space adventure, but it has nothing to do with Star Wars except for Chewie and Han, I guess. But it doesn't feel like I've said it all. I've said my piece. I don't need to be like the old man that keeps repeating himself. Not there yet.
So if they were to make, Solo 2, or let's say if we were to make Solo 2, where would we want to take that?
The singer with the head in the jar. I want more of that.
More of that, yeah.
I would like Han to learn an instrument and get in that band.
I wonder if they've opened for the Rebo band. By the way, that singer's name is Lulio Primoc. Here we go. There's Lulio. There.
Yes. I found that genuinely delightful. I always like the diegetic music and musicians in Star Wars movies. Diegetic?
Delightful.
Oh, delightful. Okay. Yes. And I laughed out loud on first viewing when the head in the jar started singing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's what's really great about it is that from the sound of it, the head in the jar can't really sing that well. And now in the Star Wars world, sometimes these singers, they don't have what we on Earth would consider great chops, but that is obviously it appeals to their audiences in universe. Yeah. But if the head in the jar had burst forth with a beautiful operatic voice, it would have been less thrilling than just this kind of murmuring.
But I mean, I think what's obviously going on is it's kind of one of those situations where he's not such a great singer, but he's so good looking. Everyone just wants to watch him sing.
Who could deny it?
And he really is.
There's no doubt about it.
He's so buff.
He's so buff.
Just a little,
that jar, you can break your hand on that jar.
I think that what I'd want to say, I don't think that they could do 2 movies now in succession because they covered too much time and they glossed over too much shit now. Like if they need to chunk up all the stuff they went through, and they need to take it back to when his little boy, because they should have started. If that a little boy and a little girl were separated the way that Han and Kara are separated older, it would be much more heartbreaking that the little girl didn't get out. It would be far more heartbreaking when you meet her again and realize she's part of this thing. Like they needed to be younger, and I understand the Jake Lloyd thing, but
I don't think it's just a Jake Lloyd thing, though. I mean, I think that, and maybe rightfully so, I think that those charged with making Star Wars now have recognized that Star Wars fans really don't want to see many kids.
Yeah, I don't know. Rogue One begins with a very brief sequence where the main character, Jyn Erso, is a little
That's true, yeah.
It gives her
and
a little
it's very effective.
And it works really well. They could have done that here. And I think, maybe I don't know if they should have, but I think the opening scenes on Corellia would have been more compelling if he was younger. I don't know if that means younger, like 14 or younger 8, but I feel like he was old for that chapter of the story. But, there's something about the if they did make a sequel to this movie, it would have to be. I mean, ideally, it would be about character development, because this movie is already addressed, as Amanda says. They've already covered everything in terms of how he got his ship, how he met Lando, how he met Chewie, how he got his name, all of that stuff. But what we still don't really know is, how did he become the angry, cynical, sarcastic, I don't have any patience for anybody guy who we meet in episode 4. You know, and it might have been nice if by the end of Solo he seemed a little less idealistic, you know. And so if they made a sequel, maybe it would be, maybe something really awful has to happen to Han, because he's in a terrible mood in the original.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do meet him on a day when he's, you know, being pursued by bounty hunters. So
that's true, yeah.
Although, you know, it's just Greedo who can't even aim.
I feel like the kid was doing a Jack Nicholson impersonation much more than he was being.
Was doing a who impersonation?
Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, there's a little.
Yeah, I kind of see that. Yeah.
I just can't, you know, that whole thing.
I sometimes thought he seemed more like a young Dennis Quaid than a young Harrison Ford.
I can see a little bit of that too.
I don't like him much. I didn't care for him much. I feel he's very actory. Like he's really acting.
He's very actory.
Yeah. You can just tell he's like in the moment. He's got to feel it. I don't know. That's just a whole other thing, and that's nothing to do with the movie. Anyway, one thing I did want to say. Wait, hold on. So one thing that CinemaSin said that might spark a little bit of conversation. It's not. It's just funny. When he says, "Is this chair taken?" and he says, "There's no one sitting in it," then it's empty, my friend, or something like that. Would say, if there's nobody sitting in it, then it's my friend. Well, this may be good advice for this particular game. It's generally in life, it's terrible advice. If nobody's sitting in it, it's yours, friend. And he goes, try doing that on a movie set in a director's chair. Try doing that at Buckingham fucking Palace.
Try to do that going to a movie when someone, you know, they put like their coat over the thing or something.
It's empty. It's not empty, friend. And the dice parsecs. There was something else I was going to bring up that this guy said. Again, go see CinemaSins and Cinema Wins. He does, which are the 10 best things. But of course, snark is funnier.
It's always funnier to not like something than like it. It's a real problem. Those of us who want to be both funny and, you know, tolerable.
Yes. He does say at the end when Darth Maul says, "Kira, you and I will be working more closely from now on." CinemaSin says, "I don't know, dude. Did you see the box office numbers for this movie?" Which leads us right into how badly it did.
It did really badly.
The worst performing movie in the franchise.
And I mean, I think that a part of that was certainly due to the boycott by those that hated The Last Jedi and wanted to make their voice heard. I think part of that was, as we talked about earlier, a lot of people, it seems like us included, just having general Star Wars fatigue. And I think it was also strangely promoted, and that probably contributed to it a bit too.
Yeah, and there was a lot of publicity around the turnover in the creative team, which also happened on Rogue One, I think. And yeah, it's not only is it the only Star Wars film that, in terms of economic numbers, flopped at the box office. Solo is the 7th most expensive film of all time, and the most expensive Star Wars movie ever, adjusted for inflation. So that is really quite something. I think that's partly because 70. What got it?
Most expensive.
Most expensive, yeah. That may be partly or largely because 70% of the film was reshot.
Yeah, but I mean, I think also a lot of that was, you know, making sure that there were practical effects, having to put all those things on sound stages and studios and build contraptions, you know, like basically building that train for people to fall around on.
Yeah.
That must have cost a pretty penny. But yeah,
Proxima, who you saw for 2 minutes. It probably took people.
You keep saying this, but she will be in my heart for an eternity.
May, but it probably took people like 7 months to get her just to even sit up straight. And
I'm so glad they did. So glad they did. I want to marry her.
So she's your favorite character in this movie?
Well, I mean, besides Chewie and Lando, I mean, I just like her a lot. I wouldn't say she's my favorite character, but I like her a lot.
What about Rio? Let's talk about Rio.
Oh yeah, Rio.
Let's talk about Rio. Yeah,
I love Rio.
I think Rio's a lot of fun, and again, we get this character that we just get to love a little bit, and then he dies.
Yeah, in these prequels, there's always a lot of principal characters who we don't have to worry about because we know they are going to turn up in a later film.
Right.
But all the new characters in Solo and very much in Rogue One, they are all, they could all go.
Disposable.
Yeah, and we lose Rio, Val, Beckett.
You have a red wedding. A veritable red wedding.
But Rio was a fun
character.
Rio was great. He's so funny. The way he was just tossing.
I love the way he says Wookiee.
Wookiee.
I love it when he says, I want to go someplace hot, warm, but not too warm. It's just so cool.
You're never more comfortable than when you're sleeping in a Wookiee's lap.
Oh yeah.
And I like when he says, "Does she have sharp teeth?"
Yeah.
Yes, does she have sharp teeth?
It's really good. Really good.
Yeah, he's a good.
And I've seen the movie multiple times. I do like in the opening kind of World War I trench warfare scene. Now recognizing that he's stumbling around in this, cumbersome outfit.
Yeah.
For him works too.
Well, I realized when I was watching it this time, the helmets look a lot like Kylo's helmet. The way the eye designs are, the eyepiece, very Kylo Ren.
They are a bit Kylo.
I was wondering if they were based on an original trilogy, something we see Imperial soldiers wearing, and maybe Kylo Ren's helmet design was based on some earlier Star Wars reference. That's also
they're a bit like the AT-AT Commanders helmets.
Are they?
But that silver,
Yeah.
Well, but they had goggles that would come down and looked kind of like that. But really, a lot of the Imperial stuff is very similar and just variations on a theme. Recently, a lot of nerds flipped their shit because they just released pictures of the new Sith troopers, and holy shit, they're red. And this takes away credibility from that one trooper that was red. He was the only red one, and now there's a bunch of red troopers. Now he's just some pussy in red.
I think we should do a special episode where Marc-Anthony, you just play Star Wars fandom. You do that character, the outraged fan, and then also the.
Up. We just keep bringing things up.
Yeah, we just throw things at you. And sometimes I really love the character voice you do for pointing out little technical things.
Oh, yeah, well, but that's just basically the comic book guy from Simpsons. I mean.
Oh, yeah, right.
That guy is very accurate to, we've all, or at least I've, if you've gone into a comic shop a few times, you've met that guy.
You know that guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Hang out long enough in coffee shops when you're in high school.
And you know what that guy smells like, too.
Oh, yeah, you do.
You know that guy, yeah.
You try to be nice, and then at some point in your life, you realize much later in life, you never had to be nice to that guy.
No. I'm not even nice to that guy, and I sometimes agree with what he says. Just don't like the way he's saying. I don't like his cadence.
I think the major character we haven't discussed yet in Solo is the character of Kira, who I suppose if there were a sequel to this, what happens to her would be a big part of the story. There's a well-intentioned story idea here to give Han a kind of lost love. This may be the source of his. He is a romantic character, but he also has an ambivalence about emotion. This could go a long way toward explaining that. And I think Emilia Clarke does a fine job, but it feels like an underwritten, a very utilitarian character who's loyal when the story needs her to be loyal and turns out to have secrets when the story needs her to do that. But it's a little convenient.
And it's a bit thin too. I mean, I think, as we said before, it might have been a situation of, let's not shoot our wad yet. Let's save a bit for her for the next installment, and then they did not get the reception they were expecting, and the next installment may not happen, or maybe deferred to a television outlet.
Yeah, I mean, she says, that she and Han grew up together on Corellia, so they've for years, from childhood or adolescence, they've shared this experience together. They are separated for 3 years, during which she becomes, she survives by being nice to Dryden Voss, who I assume it was his agents who nabbed her at the hub when she and Han are separated.
And then in some way, after 3 years, they meet up in the huge, vast expanse of space. They end up on the same yacht.
Mm-hmm. It's small galaxy.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's small galaxy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that character is sort of like, the believability is somewhat undermined by the narrative convenience of how they needed her to serve the story at various times, which is maybe not quite fair to either the character or the performer.
Yeah, I felt she was fine, but as we keep coming back to, this movie is fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not sorry that they made it or that I saw it.
No, I'm glad they made it. I liked a lot of it. I enjoy it more every time I watch it. But that's true of pretty much every Star Wars movie. Every time I watch it, I find some other way to enjoy it.
Yeah. It's fine.
It's fine. So, okay, if there's nothing more on Solo, can we talk about some of the new rumors about Rise of Skywalker?
Really, really fast.
Okay.
There's some things we didn't cover at all, which I thought was. We want to talk about his vest.
He did have a vest in certain parts of this movie.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Han's vest, is a very important character in Episode 4. In Solo, it's a different vest, of course. He gets that vest 2.5 years prior to the events of Episode 4, after his previous vest is blown off in a battle.
He wins that vest in a game of Sabacc.
Oh, and then we want to talk about the blaster strapped to his leg.
Oh, yes.
The hero shot, that it's just his leg, and he walks into the frame, and you see the blaster strapped to his leg. That is the only time I looked at it and said, "That's Han Solo."
It was a stunt, but
You think so?
they got.
Another thing that we didn't cover was that Woody Harrelson is a pothead.
Is he?
Oh my God!
He no longer smokes pot.
Really?
Yes, he quit, but he was a long time pothead.
I'm sorry, Woody. And then the last was that nobody wanted to talk about Cleveland or Alex Trebek.
I did want to talk about Alex Trebek, but I couldn't see the end.
And nobody wanted to talk about Norma dies. So that was basically.
Norma doesn't die in this one.
No,
it's unusual.
But Darth Maul did come back to life, so I was wondering if we might bring.
Right.
And I was a little.
So maybe if Norma uses her hate, she can stay alive.
Yes. And
get spider legs and.
Yes. And I was a little disappointed that neither of you used the word odor to describe the movie Oeuvre. But anyway.
Odor,
like an odor, like a Western.
Oh, okay. Auteur. Yeah.
Yes. Well, because I'm not a French film critic, so I don't subscribe to the auteur theory.
And that was like running down the block like 10 minutes ago.
Should I try it again?
No. So we want to talk about rumors? Is that what it was?
Yeah, well, I mean,
you want to close?
As we approach any new Star Wars film, especially one as anticipated as Rise of Skywalker will be, and one that's in the main cycle of stories, fan theories start to pop up and become more and more intricate and in some cases hilarious. And also for someone like myself, terrifying. Because if many of these or specific ones happen to come to fruition, I don't know how I'm going to deal with watching that transpire on screen. So the big one now is based on the most recent trailer, I guess, pointing out things like Rey has Luke's lightsaber, which was cut in half in The Last Jedi. There are lots of little details in that trailer which seem to indicate that there's might be time travel involved. And I really hope that's not the case, J.J. Abrams, but it seems like the sort of shit he might do.
What?
It seems like the sort of shit he might do. It's like he always does it. It's his Deus Ex Machina. Oh, they were in a different time.
What is it in the trailer that suggests time travel?
Well, the fact that the lightsaber, yeah, she should not have his lightsaber as intact.
It can be repaired. You put a new Kyber crystal in there, and
the nerds have looked very closely at this, Noah, and it's the exact same lightsaber. It's not changed. They know.
Okay.
They are very, very, very sure.
So
Yeah.
the conclusion is that time travel must be part of the story rather than that.
Or it's a flashback, maybe? Or
yeah, I mean, flashbacks seem to be, but a lot of people are speculating that, similar to the way that Rey and Kylo were having this connection and that was possibly being manipulated by Snoke, that they are going to be sent on this kind of like psychic trip through all of the Star Wars movies and possibly affect the past.
No. This is like turning too much into Bill and Ted. It sounds like.
This is what people are theorizing. I really hope they're wrong. I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to give Episode 9 the benefit of the doubt until I see it, as far as whether it's going to be good or whether the story choices in it are going to work. It does seem like a lot of the things that are being said about it by the people involved, including Daisy Ridley in some recent interviews, and also J.J. Abrams, there have been suggestions that there will be some sort of big surprises in it that have to do with wrapping up the entire series, all 9 films of the Skywalker story.
Which I do like hearing that in a general way.
Yes, I do too. But Daisy Ridley said a little bit confusingly on a talk show recently that Episode 9 is a different genre from the rest of the movies. It seems like maybe she didn't mean the word genre literally there, but that it would be significantly different in some way, tonally or in terms of the structure of the story.
They've made it.
It's a rom-com otter.
She has a dog, and Kylo is allergic to dogs,
and she's pretty but clumsy.
And they have to figure out how to put it together. She wears glasses, so you don't know she's pretty.
Yeah, but
then she gets contacts, and whoa.
Mm-hmm. And a new hairdo, and then they let her shop.
And the fans will be fine with all that because it's a different genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and JJ knows that. Yeah.
Well.
But I think what all of this is telling us is that this will be different from the other Star Wars movies in some fundamental ways that have to do with that there is a burden on this movie to wrap up the whole story in a way that none of the other films have.
Well, as I think we discussed before, like there's a burden on J.J. Abrams to end something. God damn it!
It was not written nor directed by M. Night Shyamalan. So
right.
It's not going to be tied up too neatly in a little like.
But it was written by.
But
who was the other person that wrote it with Abrams? It was
it's the guy who he wrote a couple of other things
that I was not terribly fond of, if I recall.
You wrote a couple of other things? You mean Star Wars wasn't the first thing you wrote?
Oddly enough, they went with a professional writer.
What do? I bus table.
Yeah, no, they actually had Woody Allen work on the script to give it some.
Woody Allen is a huge pothead. So Woody Allen Stop smoking pot. I'm gonna have to read about this. It's crazy.
Oh yes, on the Bill Maher's show, he revealed that he still appreciates the craftsmanship of a well-rolled joint, but he doesn't personally smoke anymore as of a few years ago. The answer to the question, Chris Terrio is the writer who worked on the script with J.J. Abrams for episode 9. Chris Terrio also wrote the screenplay Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, as well as Justice League he co-wrote.
Isn't Batman versus Superman known as one of like the worst movies of all time?
But he also wrote Argo, the screenplay for Argo, which is an excellent movie, I think, and he won an Oscar for that screenplay.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like Batman versus Superman is not quite the gleaming glass-filled turd that people described it to me as, but I can see looking at it and seeing that. I don't know. But then again, like I think with any Star Wars movie, I do the best I can to lower my expectations as much as humanly possible, so that I'm more likely to enjoy it out of surprise.
Expectations are just premeditated resentments, Marc-Anthony.
It's true. It's true.
It's true.
So I'm just trying to lower them.
Let's just all settle.
Just lower them like grandma's boobs.
Lower your expectations, settle, and we'll all be fine. Do not reach for those stars. Don't go chase some waterfalls, Marc-Anthony.
I think I personally, I'll be very surprised if I don't like episode 9. I've liked all the others, you know. The one that I'm the most indifferent to is Solo, which I keep saying is not bad. So, you know, I think the worst it could possibly be is not bad. And I don't know. I've been really with this new trilogy. I would be happy to be more down on it if I were. but I'm not. I thought The Force Awakens was a wonderful, nostalgic thrill ride, and I thought The Last Jedi, like Empire Strikes Back before it, deepened the story and made it more complex in interesting ways. I've been with it all along, so I expect I'll still be with it when I see episode 9.
I hope I'm there.
I think I'll love it, which is interesting because I hate everything, but I think I'll love it.
It also must be that we're at that point now where the rumor mill is out of control. I mean, it's crazy. That there's been reports of all kinds of stuff. Like it couldn't all be true because it would have to be about 10 different movies for everything we've heard to be true. There have been rumors that Harrison Ford was on the set at some point, maybe just to visit, or maybe there will be somehow a surprise Han Solo appearance, either in flashback form or something. You know, there's been rumors that the set, like visitors to the set, were not even allowed to see the set for the final scene of the movie because just to know the location would melt the minds, they said, of any fan. You know, so but all these little things dribble out, and who knows? Usually they turn out to be innocuous. And when these movies actually come out, the big things we were curious about tend to be dispensed with fairly unceremoniously, and the things that we come out talking about and interested in were things we had no way of anticipating.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I do really hope that I enjoy it. I'm just trying to lower my expectations as much as possible, and I'm not a JJ fan.
Well, maybe he'll surprise us.
He might. I hope he does.
Estimate the man. So Noah, what's our next episode here?
That's a good question, Amanda. The story from here goes that on our next episode of Faces of Stone,
2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from tonight, indeed. That'll be August 4th. Believe it or not, August 4th on our schedule. This is a theme episode, TBD. So we don't even know yet. We know that I'll be the host of our episode on August 4th. But we don't know yet. We'll have to tell you after we figure it out. It will be a to be determined.
TBD.
TBD. Star Wars.
Still, Star Wars fan, you know exactly what TBD is.
Yes.
The bisexual Dubak.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Well, now you know. On August 4th, we will be talking about the bisexual do-back. And then 2 weeks after that...
It's all I've been talking about for years anyway.
So, it's like a regular Tuesday night for Marc-Anthony.
That'll mostly be an interview. That episode will be entitled "The Bisexual Do-Back," an interview with Marc-Anthony Macon. Will be followed on August 18th, 2 weeks after that, by our return to the chronology of the series with a discussion of Rogue One.
Rogue One.
So that's what's coming up on Faces of Stone. Any closing thoughts or anything?
Well, I just hope that when we all get back, we'll feel really squeaky.
I wanted to say that.
Well,
I'll say squeaky next time.
We could say that Faces of Stone.space is the internet's #1 destination for anyone who is looking for our archive of past episodes or our upcoming schedule. We might also mention that the three of us, if you're trying to reach us, are all over the internet. You really can't not find us on the internet. On Twitter, for example, we are M_A_Macon, president of Sisk, and Noah Diamond. And then maybe in our next episode in 2 weeks, maybe the weather will be a little kinder and you'll be able to see us a little less sticky and me in full studio lighting.
I can't wait for that. Until then,
thank you all for joining us.
We'll see you next time on
Faces
Faces of Stone.
Stone.